Okay, hopefully you've had a chance to factor this out. If we notice here between 8, -14, and 6, they all have a 2 in common. Also, between x cubed, x squared, and x to the first, notice here this was not a quadratic, but they all have an x in common. So if we factor out a GCF of 2x, we are left with 4x squared minus 7x plus 3. Now we have our quadratic 2 factor. Looking at our first term with 4, we have our options of 1 and 4 and 2 and 2. With our options of 3, we have 1 and 3. So multiplying these out, I started with 2 and 2, but they did not give me the solutions. So then I went on to 1 and 4, plugging in 1x and 4x, and then using my terms of 1 and 3 to guess and check to my middle terms. I noticed that my last term was positive, so it must have been the same exact sign. My middle term was negative this time, so I knew they're both negative numbers. So then I plugged in -1 and -3. I got 4x squared, which checked off my first term. X times -3 is -3x. -1 times 4x is -4x, which adds to my -7x. And -1 times -3 was +3. So my final answer was 2x times x minus 1 times 4x minus 3. Okay, on to number 5. Our problem reads 6x squared minus 11x minus 2. Pause the video and try factoring this problem out. Okay, looking at these numbers, there was no GCF because there's nothing that goes to 6, 11, and 2 evenly. This was our quadratic, so I went on to factoring. My options for 6 were 1 and 6 and 2 and 3. My options for 2 were 1 and 2. So when I worked out my options here, I found that 2 and 3 did not work. 6x and 1x worked with +1 and -2. This was a negative sign, so I knew these were opposite signs. I guessed and checked until I found 6x times x was 6x squared. 6 times -2 is -12. 1 times x is 1x. -1 and +1 and -12 added to my -11. And 1 times -2 multiplied to -2. So my final answer was 6x plus 1 times x minus 2. All right, our next problem is 2x squared plus 22x plus 60. Pause the video and try this one out. All right, the first thing we notice here, between all three terms, they have a 2 in common. So this one had a GCF of 2. I factored 2 out of my problem, leaving behind x squared plus 11x plus 30. This problem made me happy because our 1x squared, these were the easy ones to factor. So all I had to do left was factor that out, and I had 2 times x plus 5 times x plus 6. I can multiply these back to check. X times x is x squared. X times 6 is 6x. 5 times x is 5x. 5 times 6 is 30. My middle terms add to +11. I can even take it a step further by multiplying the 2 back to get 2x squared, 22x, and +60. So the whole thing should check back to the original problem. So my final answer was 2 times x plus 5 times x plus 6. All right, flip your paper over. Next we have factoring a trinomial with 2 variables. So here it kind of gives a written out explanation to this solution. It's not too hard. The first thing we always need to do is find the numbers that will multiply to the c term but add to the b term. So the c term in this case was 14, so I started to list off my factors of 14. And then I found the 2 that added to +9. In this case, 7 and 2. They have a sum of 9 and multiply to 14, so they are the correct values. Next, when I factor, I know I need to get to x squared. So I have my x times x to get x squared. Now in order to get my middle term as xy and my last term as y squared, my last two terms of 7 and 2, we just tack on a y to that. And we'll see exactly how that works in our first problem. So our first problem is x squared plus 6xy plus 8y. So the first thing I'm going to do with this is I'm going to rewrite this problem without the y's in there. X squared plus 6x plus 8. Now you should know how to do this one. We've been doing this one for quite some time now. My a term is 1, so all I have to do is find a term that multiplies to positive 8 but adds to positive 6. In this case, I would have x plus 4 times x plus 2. X times x is x squared. X times 2 is 2x. 4 times x is 4x, which adds to 6x. And 4 times 2 is 8. So this was pretty simple. We know how to work this problem. So now I'm going to rewrite this one, but I'm going to add in the y's. X squared plus 6xy plus 8y squared. So my terms are the same with this x squared to be x and x. And I know the terms that add to 6 but multiply to 8 are 4 and 2. And I know they're also both positive. In order to get this y squared on my last term, all I have to do is tack on some y's to those factors. We can multiply this back to check. X times x is x squared. X times 2y is 2xy. 4y times x is 4xy. And both of these add to 6xy. My last term, 4y times 2y, is positive 8y squared. So this all checks off for my trinomial. My answer is x plus 4y times x plus 2y. All right, let's do another one. Looking at this, we have y squared minus 6yz plus 5z squared. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to place my y's, because this is just a positive 1y squared. Y times y will give me that y squared. Next, I'm going to find what factors would make this work. So I'm multiplying to positive 5, but I'm adding to negative 6. So the two options I have for 5 are just 1 and 5. So placing these in the right spots to get negative 6, I would have a negative 1 and a negative 5. Negative 1 times negative 5 is positive 5. Negative 1 minus 5 is negative 6. And then I place the z's to get my y squared, yz, and z squared. Multiplying this back, y times y is y squared. Y times negative 5z is negative 5yz. Negative 1 times zy is negative 1yz. I always put those alphabetically. And negative 1z times positive 5 or times negative 5z is positive z squared. And these will add up to my negative 6yz. So when I write my answer, y minus, I don't need the 1 times z, so I'm just going to say y minus z times y minus 5z. And that's my final answer. All right, our next problem is a squared plus 2ab minus 15b squared. Pause the video and try this one out. All right, with this problem, I was looking what multiplied to my negative 15, but added to positive 2. In this case, 5 and negative 3. I multiply back to check my work. A times a is a squared. A times negative 3b is negative 3ab. 5b times a is positive 5ab. And 5b times negative 3b is negative 15b squared. So my final answer was A plus 5B times A minus 3B. All right, go ahead and pause the video and try out number 4. Okay, you had a few more options with 60. 60 could have been 1 times 60, 2 times 30, 3 times 20, 4 times 15, 5 times 12, and 6 times 10. I found out when I started to guess and check that my solution was 10 and negative 6. So my answer is G plus 10H times G minus 6H multiplied back to my trinomial. Okay. Number 3, we have a few more options because now we have an A term on this that is not 1. So here we have 1 times 3 for my A option. My C option we have 1 times 8 and 2 times 4. So I'm going to start this off with my A option being 1 and 3. I know that this has to be X and 3X. But I've got a couple more options with my C term. So I'm going to get my pencil. I notice this is negative here, so the signs are going to be opposites. I'm going to start off by guessing and checking with my 2 and 4. So I'm going to start with my 2y and 4y, because don't forget, your y times y has to get back your y squared. Then I'm going to multiply these out. 3x times 2y is 6xy, and x times 4y is 4xy. Well, I need one of them positive and one of them negative. If I'm going to end up with 2xy positive, I need my 6 to be positive and my 4 to be negative. So this means that this term here was negative 4y, and this term here was positive 2y. I'm going to double check to make sure this worked. X times 3x is 3x squared. X times negative 4y is negative 4xy. 2y times 3x is 6xy. They add together to 2xy. And 2y times negative 4y is negative 8y squared. So this one checks off. My final answer written as x plus 2y times 3x minus 4y. Okay, looking at number 6, we notice here this is a cubic, and we are only factoring squares or quadratic, so I'm going to check for a GCF. Between 6, 10, and 56, they all have a common number of 2. Between x cubed, x squared y, and xy squared, they all have an x in common. Notice the first term has no y's though, so we cannot factor out a y. Writing whatever I have left over, to get 6x cubed, this came from 3x squared, and if I multiply these back, I would get that first term, minus 10xy. Notice here I had squared. Oh, not 10xy. Let me fix that up. It will be 5, negative 5xy. And noticing here, I had an x squared, but I factored one x out, so leaving behind 1x. And then my last term is negative 28y squared. I still have my y squared, but I factored that x out. All right. Finish this problem by factoring out what's left over in the trinomial. Okay, I listed off my options for my 3, which were 1 and 3, and my options for 28, 1 and 28, 2 and 14, 4 and 7. Found my factors by guessing and checking to be 3x plus 7y and x minus 4y. Don't forget the GCF out front of 2x. So this is my final answer. Be ready to practice the next day.